What's up, guys? Welcome back. I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for all the support on the last video. I'm pretty sure I got back to all of you guys in the comments. I at least read them all. Some of you guys were killing me. The Ludwick's It's Not a Junkyard Garage. Listen, all you car guys know as well as I do that you don't pass up a good deal when one comes your way. And this is why all of these old timers that are like car hoarders have yards in their backyard right full of cars. I mean, the square body Chevy, that was a part of my uncle's paving crew. They lost the motor in it. And when I picked up the cab over, the original plan was to use this dually long wheelbase square body Chevy chassis to put the 52 cab over. And I basically wanted to do that because it had an IFS, independent front suspension. But then, obviously having a drivetrain issue, I was going to have to put a motor in it. And I wanted to do a 12-valve Cummins power plant with a manual. And so what we ended up finding was a second-gen Dodge that I used the chassis and the drivetrain in. So the Beetle, 1970 Beetle, I got off my good friend John, who's one of my oldest friends. We grew up together. And him and his dad were slowly building this Beetle over the course of 20 years, and they would just tinker. Where all the work is on the pan. They basically built the whole pan, and the body was next on the list, and their lives took different paths, and just the thing just sat. And so I got that because that's now a Beetle pan future project, like the 700. And the cab over, I know, guys, I know all my friends are hard on me. It's tough love, and I need it. I need the tough love on the cab over. My dad and I really put a ton of work into this thing, getting the two paired, getting a custom pedal cluster built, building a custom steering column, custom axle. We built a 7-inch drop axle in the front because the Dodge chassis are not IFS, they're a straight axle. The Sixer, I couldn't pass it up. So thank you guys so much for all the support on that. And yes, option 3. We're going option 3. I'm going to keep it. It's going to be a slow burn project. The car's been sitting for over 20 years. It's in rough shape. I don't even know if it runs. I don't know what the status of it was when it was parked and what the issues were. But my plan for the car would be like an outlaw build. And static, motorsport wheels, very period correct, very 80s. And just a driver. And thank you so much to everybody who's reached out with info about these cars. Balthazar in Munich, at BMW in Germany, for deciphering the VIN and some code numbers. It's looking like, and I don't know for sure because the clutch is stuck to the firewall and I haven't gotten it running yet. It looks like this is the 5-speed dogleg gearbox in this car, in the CSI for 81, which is incredible. I mean, I've always been a motorsport nerd. And yeah, pretty stoked that might be a dogleg gearbox car. So that'll be really cool. The wheels are not Sentras either. The wheels are Didier or Didier. I've heard of the name, but I haven't actually heard anybody say the name. But it's a wheel company out of Italy. So that's what those are. Very, very comparable to the Sentras. But yeah, they're Didier or Didier. Didier are those wheels. Okay, so Sixer is here. Glad we got that done. That was last second. So cool. But back on the 2F Polo Coupe. This is key. This is important because we're down to, I don't even know, 4 weeks maybe before I've got to get to Alpine Volks Fair in that car. So I was in the middle of working on the front strut assemblies here in my dad's shop when I got the call about the Sixer. So we're back in here. We're working on the Polo Coupe. I want to give a shout out to ECS Tuning for helping out on this project. Thank you so much, guys, for all the help. I think this is front wheel bearings. I haven't opened it up yet. There's a few different packages coming for just maintenance stuff on the Polo, but the front wheel bearings were very key. As I mentioned in a previous video, I needed a specific front Mark 1 Rabbit wheel bearing that had the appropriate ID that the Polo hub flange will press into. So I'm pretty sure that's what's here. Got an air filter. I had to order this separately because none of the Mark 1s here in America had the circular air filter or one like this one. They were all square. So I've got an air filter because the one that's in the car is pretty old and pretty filled up with junk. So I've got one of the factory strut assemblies on the wall-mounted spring compressor right now. I'm getting the springs off, getting the shocks out before I start cutting the tie rod mounts off the strut bodies. I just wanted to get the shocks out and get everything that's flammable inside that thing out of there before I start putting heat to that strut body. So gonna do that, gonna get both springs off, take them apart, and then look at what it's gonna take to tear these Subaru threaded sleeves down. I'm gonna take the brackets and all the little brackets and guides and whatnot, but the bolt dropouts, get all that taken off and see what I've got for room on this tube. Cut this down. If I've got room, I'll put it in the bandsaw. But get this cut down and see if I've got enough room to weld the factory tie rod mount to this, which will then thread in between the bag body and the actual dropouts on the Mark I Airlift Performance bolt-in kit. So this has quite a bit of room to come down to open it up enough space to get that threaded sleeve on. And the plan is to index them just right so the Ackerman angle is comparable to the Ackerman angle on the Polo strut bodies, because that's key. That's very key for tow and for steering. First spring is off. Nobody died. We have a wall-mounted spring compressor here in the shop. So I got the spring locked in up top. All the jaws locked in down below. Make sure everything's seated nice and tight. Go nice and easy as you go down. Compress it. Once tension is off that top nut, as long as those threads are good, that top nut should back right off. Drop the strut assembly out the bottom. Unrelease the tension or release the tension and pull the spring out. All right, so I know a lot of this is probably pretty redundant and boring for some of you guys who just want to see a bagged Polo. But the whole reason why I started a YouTube channel was to put the work into documenting every step of the way. I do have a lot of friends that are just getting into cars, that are really fascinated by it, fascinated by all the little details, as am I. I mean, I love watching meticulous like build thread documentation. That's what I'm doing with this project. I mean, I would rather just work. I'd rather just do it and not take the time to film all this stuff. But I think looking back, you know, years from now, even I will be happy that I documented all this stuff, because I'll remember some of the little things that I had to go through or to figure out. So I've got one of the strut assemblies all torn down. The other one's got the spring off, so I'm done with the spring compressor. Loosened up the threaded collar that holds the shock in. Got the shock out, drained all the oil, because some of the shocks like leak oil, so these tubes will be filled with oil. Scraped a lot of the dirt and grime out from around the perch, and now I'm going to get in there with a wheel and get all the paint off, because the quickest way to cut this perch right off so I can get to, you know, to the welds of the tie rod mount, because I don't want to hack the tie rod mount up. I want to leave as much as possible of this. So to get up to the top weld on the mount, I want to get the perch off. And the easiest way to do that without using consumables up is using the plasma cutter. So I'm going to get this down to bare metal as best I can, get a place where I can get a good ground to it, or keep it in a vise and ground to the vise, and basically just cut around the weld so I can hopefully just slide the perch right off. All right, guys, so I swung up to my friend Nick Acton's shop. Nick does the Shelby Cobra preservation, restoration, scratch builds, all that stuff. That's whose Cobras are in my dad's shop. My dad works with him, doing a lot of Shelby Cobra work. So Nick is basically a machinist. He's got a Bridgeport, a milling machine, a lathe, some more minute, more precision machines than we have here in my dad's shop. So I went up and kind of picked his brain about what I'm doing here. Before I cut my steering arm up, I cleaned up the strut body hole, and so I could get some solid measurements off of it, and took the threaded sleeve up that I'm going to cut all of this stuff off of, that these two are basically going to mate to. Then I can thread that on to the threaded airlift body. So I came up with a new idea. And this was an idea I kind of had rattling around in my head, and I bounced it off Nick, and he kind of confirmed that it was a good idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brand new steering arm. Since this is a smaller diameter than the outer diameter of this, and instead of hacking this up and then trying to salvage it, simply for the tie rod taper, the tie rod end taper at the end there. It's the only reason why I didn't go ahead and make an arm. I made an arm in the Fox, but didn't have a taper for the tie rod end. It was just a straight bore. And in the Derby, I tried to salvage these, and they worked well, but they just weren't that pretty. So I'd like this to be aesthetically pleasing looking as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm designing a tie rod mount. I've got my spacing and my offsets pulled off of the factory arm, and I'm going to laser cut some templates out of cardboard and get them paired up. Make sure the holes are right. Make sure the mount hole will be able to slide over this sleeve. And once I get the file just right out of cardboard, I'll take it to my dad's CNC machine, the plasma cutter, and cut it once out of metal. Hopefully, that's the great relationship between the laser machine and my dad's plasma CNC cutter, is I can pre-pro stuff out of cardboard with the laser until I get my file just right, and then we cut it out of steel once, rather than design on the computer, cut it out of steel, out of maybe something thinner that's like scrap laying around. But regardless, you're wasting metal with trying to critique your file. And this is the way this index is in the car. You know, that's made out of sheet metal basically, but it's gusseted and has a pinch on it, has like a pinch weld on it for rigidity and structure. Rather than making my plate flat stock out of like 3/8 and then maybe making some gussets that bend down, the other idea of making my own plate is that it won't take up as much real estate on the threaded body of the Mark I strut that this does. So I can keep this as short as possible for my overall drop in the car. So my plan is to make it out of 1/2-inch steel, which luckily my dad's plasma cutter can pierce cut. We can actually pierce cut 1/2-inch steel, which won't need a gusset. The 1/2-inch steel will be overkill for how thick and strong that'll be. Make it out of 1/2-inch steel. Make it so it'll slide over this threaded body that will thread onto the Mark I strut. Weld it up, but I'm going to cut out this bushing that's in the factory steering arm that has a 5.5-degree taper in it. That's an insert that's welded into that. Nick has a bunch of tapered bits, but unfortunately the most common are 7 and 10-degree taper bits. So for the sake of time, since time is of the essence right now, I'm not going to order a 5.5-degree taper drill bit and then wait for it to show up. I'm going to cut this insert out of the factory steering arm that has the right taper for the tie rod end and the Polo. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it right out and then put it in Nick's lathe to turn it down to a precise diameter that will meet the diameter of the hole I'm going to cut into my custom steering arm. That's what I'm doing. So right now I'm just going to cut a pre-pro out of cardboard, clean this sleeve up, and then mate the two, maybe thread it onto the body, and just get a visual for what everything's going to look like. Well, the holes line up, so not bad for a first pre-pro cut. So I got the centers lined up pretty well. You'll notice that these holes are significantly larger than the factory strut tube. As I mentioned before, I think the OD of this pipe thread to the OD of the Polo strut tube is like an extra 10 millimeters. So that's what that larger hole is for. That'll be enough material in the steel to have a lip to weld to, because I'm going to weld this top and bottom, you know, on that. So it'll be down here a little bit farther. I'm going to turn this in the lathe at Nick's, so this will all be nice and consistent. I'll take it down just a little bit to smooth it out, and I'll redesign this according to whatever I turn this down to. But this is basically how that's going to go, with a half inch thick piece of steel, so I don't need to gusset it. Otherwise, I'd want to gusset it so it was stronger. This one is kind of built in as a gusset because it's triangulated. But with a half-inch piece of steel that comes all the way out, I won't need to use more of this pipe than I really have to keep real estate on the strut body small, so I can bring the lower mount up as high as I can to ensure that my collapsed height keeps the car as low as I want it to. This is the best part about the laser machine, that I can actually pre-pro stuff out of cardboard and get things lined up and critiqued. That way my file's good and I can cut once out of steel. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. I know, just redundant calculating and math and trying to figure out what's going on, and lots of explaining. I know most of these episodes so far on the Polo have just been kind of talking about what I'm going to do and slowly putting it together. The way I see this YouTube series, and luckily I've had a few friends kind of say this is what they like about what I've been doing so far, but really the way I look at this YouTube channel in general is just a more detailed visual extension of my podcast. Because on the podcast, I've had plenty of friends say, oh, you know, you should have like a TV screen behind you, or you should superimpose photos of everything you're talking about. I want the podcast to just feel like you're in a room with two of us having a conversation, and that's it. And if you don't know anything about the car we're talking about and you want to know bad enough, you could like find the Instagram page of whoever we're talking about and go search it out. It's more work, I know, but basically instead of doing that, that's what I see, or that's what I view this YouTube channel as, is basically just a more visual podcast. Because that's what this is. I'm just talking about these cars. So later on down the road, when I talk about the Polo, you could actually watch the whole series of me putting the car together and me talking about all the things that I want to do, and maybe along the way, things that change. Because originally when I cut these steering arms off, I was just going to use these steering arms. And once I went up to Nick's and we started talking about different avenues and different lanes I could go with this, I decided that making the steering arm was going to be probably the best and cleanest looking route to go. So here we are. So I really appreciate you guys communicating with me both on Instagram and on the YouTube channel. This is it for now. Next episode will be kind of putting this all together, maybe cutting them out of steel and actually starting to put it together. Wheels are being made right now. Super excited to show you guys what Rotiform and I are working on for wheels for the Polo. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.